In the day's other news, President Trump also said today he would cancel all executive actions that former President Biden signed using an Autopen. That's a device that replicates someone's signature. Both Democratic and Republican presidents have used Autopens, including Mr. Trump, though he says he's used it only for unimportant papers. A Justice Department legal opinion dating back decades authorized its use. President Trump had previously ordered an investigation into his predecessor's use of the device, which Biden months ago said was a distraction.
In the last hour, that any document signed by the former president while he was in office is, quote, hereby terminated and of no further force or of effect. He goes on to allege that Biden was not involved in what he called the, quote, Autopen process, and that if he says he were involved, that Biden will be brought up on perjury charges. This news is just breaking, and there are a lot of questions. Perhaps most importantly, if the president even has the authority to do this, or just what orders could be or would be impacted if he is indeed successful. So let's get off the sidelines and go into the arena. My panel is here along with CNN senior White House correspondent Kristen Holmes, who's in West Palm Beach, where the president spent the Thanksgiving holiday. So Kristen, former President Biden's use of the Autopen, of course, has been a frequent topic for this president, but he's going much, much further here.
Yeah, and Manu, look, there are a lot of questions here, as you noted. I mean, there's legalities involved, and talking about what this would even apply to. I mean, Trump in this Truth Social post says that it's 92% of things that Biden signed to use the Autopen. It's unclear where he got that percentage. And again, the legality of all of this, can he just undo what Biden did? I would assume the answer is no, but of course, we're still talking to lawyers to figure out what exactly is, if anything, possible here. Now, as you've noted, President Trump has been fixated on this idea of Biden using the Autopen to the point where he actually changed his portrait, Biden's portrait in his presidential walk of fame, to an Autopen there. And he has said, both privately and publicly, that he believes that this Autopen is going to be the biggest scandal that the country has seen. Now, a couple of things. You talk a little bit about what happens if Biden pushes back and says he was part of the process. He'll get charged with perjury. That's what Trump says in this Truth Social. Well, we know Biden has already pushed back on this idea. He has said that everything that and all the use of the Autopen was completely above board, that he knew everything that was going on while he was president. It wasn't the people around him. He was making the decisions, even if they were using the Autopen. So what exactly does that mean for this so-called perjury charge, and what happens next there? And the other part of this, of course, being that President Trump has called for an investigation already into Biden's use of the Autopen, and at one point essentially said that anything that he signed should be null and void. Again, as you noted, this is taking it a huge step further, saying that it is null and void and that everything is going to be reversed. We are still reaching out to White House officials as well as to lawyers to figure out if there is anything that this means in the legal sense, and also in terms of the White House, what they're specifically looking at, if anything, when it comes to reversing decisions that were signed by Biden using this Autopen.
Yeah, a lot of questions. If you get any of those answers, we'll bring you right back up. Kristen Holmes live for us, traveling with the president. Thank you so much. And my panel is here in the arena, including CNN political analyst and investigative reporter for the New York Times, David Fahrenthold, contributing columnist at the Boston Globe, Eugene Scott, CNN political commentator Sochi Hinojosa, and Republican strategist Malik Abdul. We're also joined by Donald Trump's former attorney, Bill Brennan, who's live with us as well. Bill, thank you so much for joining us, too. I want to start with you and about whether Trump even has the authority to do this. He's saying he can do this. Can he actually do this legally?
Manu, it's my understanding that the Autopen's been around since around 1930. 2011, President Barack Obama first used it in a high-value document. It was 3 sections of the Patriot Act that he wanted extended by Congress. Unfortunately, he was in France at the time. He used it. It was valid. In 2005, President George W. Bush asked the Department of Justice for an opinion, and the DOJ said at that time, under certain circumstances, the use of an Autopen is legally sufficient. I think the real issue here, Manu, is going to be scienter, whether or not President Biden knew that the documents that were signed with the Autopen were used. If he knew and he approved it, then I think it passes muster.
Yeah, because the president is saying that Biden would be charged with perjury. What basis does he have for making that charge?
Well, perjury is lying under oath. I think I don't know that President Biden made a statement that he approved the Autopen, that perjury would be applicable here. There's no doubt that the Autopen itself is a document that is a device that can be used. It's all going to depend on circumstances.
Oh, Bill, I think we lost Bill's feed there. He might have fallen there on the ground, but we'll bring him right back because he's got some good analysis here. Sochi, I'm going to start with you because you have worked at the DOJ before.
Yeah.
This is what Bill was referring to. There was a 2005 legal opinion from George W. Bush's Office of Legal Counsel within the Justice Department. He says, we emphasize that we are not suggesting that the president may delegate the decision to approve and sign a bill, only that having made this decision, he may direct a subordinate to affix the president's signature to the bill. Basically saying, Autopen, A-OK. And we've seen Obama do it. We saw Trump do it.
Trump does it.
Biden do it. What are the implications of this?
Well, I think that there are two things he's talking about here. He's talking about executive orders. Right. If Trump would like to undo executive orders, like, for example, prescription drug costs and all sorts of pieces of policy that Biden did to lower costs for families, if Trump wanted to do that, he could do that. But I think that would be an unpopular thing for Trump to reverse each and every one of them. He would have to unwind them. When it comes to Biden's pardons, he cannot undo those pardons. Those pardons are sound, whether or not he used the Autopen. I think what people will also look at is you talk about his mental acuity, whether or not Biden was making decisions for himself. Can I just say, I don't think anyone in the White House was telling Joe Biden to pardon his family. I am pretty sure that that is a decision that is a very personal decision made by the President of the United States. And so I think it's interesting what he's saying about this, because at the end of the day, the most controversial pardon was his family. And you can guarantee Joe Biden made that decision.
Yeah, and as Bill was saying, if the President Biden says that he did it, then how do you charge him with perjury? And Trump's just throwing out perjury. We're going to charge him with perjury.
Yeah, so that's a very good point that he's talking about executive orders. And I think people should realize, I was looking at the numbers, and by February, Donald Trump had already rescinded about 40% of Joe Biden's executive orders. This is something that all presidents do. They can rescind an executive order. You know, I'll be the Trump whisperer here. And for real, this is actually more of a rhetorical device for Donald Trump. I can pretty much assure you that the majority of the 77 million people who voted for Donald Trump don't care about the Autopen. This is something that is specific to Donald Trump, and I don't think that it's going to be anything that comes out of this. Yes, it may be some things, you know, if there's something more, you know, more than maybe executive orders or pardons or something, but I don't think that there's anything going to come out of this, and this is one of those instances where Donald Trump kind of throws out a bit of red meat, but only to the base, and it's not something that resonates with the majority of the country.
So distraction tactic?
I was definitely going to say, you've heard us say repeatedly that every accusation is something rooted in what perhaps is happening with the president himself. There's been quite a bit of reporting this week suggesting that President Trump does not work as much or as hard as he would like people to think. And so he's pivoting and saying, you know what, Biden works even less. And so that's where we are right now. That's the talking point. We know that what happened yesterday, unfortunately, sent him on a spiral, and he's thinking about immigration and now these other issues that he blames Biden for. And this is where he is right now. And the week's not even over yet.
Yeah, and Trump has been obsessed about some of these pardons that came late in the Joe Biden presidency. This is what he said when he was doing that famous event every year. The president pardons the turkeys. He said this, taking a swipe at Joe Biden.
Sleepy Joe Biden, he used an Autopen last year for the turkeys pardon. So I have the official duty to determine, and I have determined that last year's turkey pardons are totally invalid, as are the pardons of about every other person that was pardoned other than where's Hunter? No, Hunter's was good.
I mean, what happens now if Trump is indeed saying he's going to pull those pardons back? And then are they going to go and charge the Biden family?
So here's what's interesting to me. The beginning of this term, this Trump term, what stood out from the last term was that when Trump said something, something actually happened behind it. The administration would come along and make that into law. Even weird things like we're going to call it the Gulf of America. Remember the effort they put in to make sure people said Gulf of America. What we're seeing now is a return to what happened in the first term, which is like you can just ignore a lot of what Trump said. A lot of what Trump says, it's even things that sound like they have the force of law, that even say, like this has the force of law, his administration sort of ignores, life just goes on without it. I think that's what we're starting to see more of that he says things that sound very official, but there's no follow-up. Nobody comes along behind him. He's exceeded the capacity of his administration or the interest.
The streets that stopped clapping. The Remove the Regime protests in Washington, D.C. mark a turning point in Trump's presidency. Not because people opposed him, but because the opposition has matured into a mass movement that no longer fears his retaliation. Tens of thousands gathered, not out of partisan loyalty, but out of exhaustion, frustration, and a deep national embarrassment at what the presidency has become. Trump has always fed on fear of immigration, fear of criticism, fear of institutions plotting against him. But these protests carry a different tone. They are not scared of him. They are tired of him. And tired populations are far more dangerous to authoritarian personalities than hostile ones. Hostility energizes Trump. Exhaustion isolates him. The chant, "Remove the regime," is potent, not because it's radical, but because it labels Trump's presidency as illegitimate, in a way that cuts deeper than policy criticism. It frames him not as a leader, but as a distortion, a figure whose continuation in power is not a disagreement, but a danger. And for the first time in years, the protests are not merely reacting to Trump's actions, they are defining the narrative themselves. This terrifies Trump. His dominance depends on controlling the emotional temperature of the country. He must be the center, adored, hated, feared, mocked, but always central. But now, crowds gather without his invitation, without his framing, without his adversarial permission. They define the conflict on their terms. He becomes background noise. For a man whose political power is tied to attention, irrelevance is death. The movement also signals something deeper. The public no longer sees Trump as an exception to the democratic system. They see him as a threat to it. The impeachment calls are symbolic of a wider sentiment, a sense that institutions must be protected from the man leading them. Protesters aren't asking for policy concessions. They are asking for removal. That is the kind of shift no presidency recovers from. For the first time since Trump entered national politics, the streets have stopped clapping. They're not cheering him or jeering him. They're demanding the end of him. And he knows it.